Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to a soulful morning. Let's start our beautiful morning by going inwards, by being in alignment with our breath work. See how wonderfully the breath is flowing in and flowing out. This always helps us center, balance, and align ourselves. This very act of closing our eyes and being aligned with our breath helps us leave whatever we are doing in the morning or any time in the back of our mind. This also helps our subconscious mind to take over. This also helps in making our breath go deeper. Even though we're not intending to do it, it automatically happens. Because the universal law applies of wherever we are focusing, that expands. So where we start focusing on our breath, even though we don't intend to make it longer, it'll expand. It'll become the yogic breathing, even if it's not. This wonderful breath leads to deletion of cells that are no longer required by the body and addition of cells that are required by the body. So try and visualize that our body is purging out the unnecessary cells, and that purging out doesn't have to be like a purge or a vomit. It can just be that our body is letting these cells, just releasing, just letting go. So you can probably imagine that from the various pores of your being, these cells are simply moving out. You could see them going out in clusters, independently, all over your body, they're leaving. You could also feel that your body is lightening up. These cells could be the extra fat that you no longer care for. And you find yourself churning, burning, and melting. Or you find yourself releasing. Or you find yourself lighter. Whatever be the process, just let go. We unknowingly and many times knowingly hold on to so much of baggage, unnecessary baggage, emotional baggage, giving that ego self, I, me, and am so much importance. Without me, this can't happen. Without me, that can't happen. But deep down, we somehow know that without me, everything can happen, maybe just as well, or even better. It's just a brum. It's a myth. So when I am not so important for others, then why shouldn't I become important for myself? And because I'm important, that's why I join these morning sessions to discover who am I. And this I is not my lower self, my ego self. This I is my soul. And we are traversing on the soul's journey with hope, with faith, with belief. This way, we also start giving attention to our so called gut feeling, which is a soul's calling, because the heart never lies. Whatever message comes, we start adhering to it, listening to it, acting on it, and then gradually we realize that yes, this works. So let's take 100 seconds and amplify the gratitude in our lives by making the lotus of gratitude and thinking of the beautiful things that have happened to us of late over the weekend. So much to be thankful for. And yet, most of it we take it for granted. Some things we should try and see. हमने मांगा था तो हमें मिला. Because we asked, so we received. It was so simple. Or we expressed and we got. So then why is it that we are scared to ask? Why is it that the fear comes in? Why is it that we don't think we are worthy enough? Why is it that we don't accept who we are the way we are? Yes, wanting to become the better version of ourselves is absolutely beautiful. But at what cost? If anybody emotionally, physically, spiritually, ethically abuses us, we have a right to stand tall and strong and make them understand who we are. It doesn't have to be a physical fight, even if they've had physical abuse, 1% if there has been. And if you can't physically stand tall, emotionally, ethically, you can stand tall. So let's ask the universe for the guidance, the nurturing, the mentoring, and asking that whatever cells now you're giving in our body, give me the cells of courage, of acceptance, of strength, of grit, of zest, of willpower, the power. And feel these cells entering your body. If you feel expanding your heart or your arms, you can. Whatever we want, we get. Sometimes we wish for the worst and we get that too. So may we be careful in what we wish. May we tap into our innate wisdom, eternal wisdom. Because the masters are always there, guiding us, guarding us, protecting us, nurturing us, nudging us. Sometimes we ask for half the things and they're not complete. If it's rain deprived, you say, rain will be great. Let it rain. And then pause. So, what was our intention actually? Let it rain adequately enough to nurture everything around and not destroy, right? So, ask for what you want in completion and then leave the rest on Him. If you believe in divine goddess and ask for any goddess energy, ask for it to do the right thing at the right time because the energy can be misused. And let me tell you, these energies are given to make us our better versions first. It's very good to be compassionate, kind hearted, but that compassion, kind hearted should also be going in your family time. Going outwardly and blessing everybody is beautiful, but let the blessings begin at home. Why do outsiders have a better picture of us than what we are truly? Because we have put on a mask. So may we get the power to leave the mask behind. Life has to give us so much. It has so much that it wants to give us. Are we in the receiving mode? Are we allowing the body to release these cells and make space for new ones? Or do we want to rewrite the program and manifest some major physical problem? It's all in our hands, in our minds, in our hearts. What are we connected and tuned with? Is a question that we all must understand. Life is such a blessing. Are we counting our blessings? So much to be done, so much to be received. Can we lead our lives with more love? Can we try and convert our love into unconditional love? That can easily happen when we start expanding our heart and doing things just because we feel like doing things. Imagine yourself at a busy traffic light in your city. As always, you will find some beggars, some trans people, some amputated, handicapped person asking for something. Your logical mind would say, if we give any money, we are encouraging these beggar driven groups. But your love filled heart will say, let me share something with them. Now you may peep into your wallet, but what if you have something in your car which you feel like giving? Will you give it? The logical mind would say, oh, it's expensive. They will not value it. I'm not asking us to give our gadgets away. No. I'm not asking us to give our jewelry away. No. What more do we have in our heart which we can give? What if we roll down the window and speak for 2 minutes or 1 minute of the traffic signal going on with love and give them blessings and ask them the reason why they don't work? Because they are worthy. You never know when your one line of encouragement changes lives, and God has planted you then to be the change in that soul's life. We are so humanly tuned in, that we tune in everything in the value of money, mostly. And I'm not denying that we should, because money can buy you everything in a way. The clothes that you're wearing right now, the house that you're sitting under, the heater or the fan or whatever's going on in your house. Everything has been bought with money. Some people say shopping can help you bring happiness, but that's only momentary. Long term happiness is something much more. Can we start tuning into our happiness? Nothing irrational, just going deep within. So now take again 100 seconds and think of the three things you want to do to make your life more meaningful. Not just looking after the house or your duties as a man or a woman, but what legacy can you leave for this world? How can you make the world a better person? How can you just impact one life and not many? But that impact should be very impactful. Think of it. Set the tone for the week, for your life ahead. Life gives us so much. What are we giving back? And with this beautiful intention, or whatever you've decided, expand your angel heart by expanding your hands in abundance pose and feeling the bluish white light coming straight into your heart, or maybe through your mind, your crown chakra flowing into your agna, and then coming into your throat and finally into your heart. Whatever works for you, see it crystallize and see it sparkling like little diamonds. And when you receive this beautiful shower of blessings, keep them in your heart, safe and secured. To be able to share easily is also an act of love. Thank you, universe, for blessing each one of us with these magical gifts. And I'll slowly start blessing everybody around. And now, come back in the moment and we start a beautiful book and lead ourselves into miracle and magics that keep happening every single day without fail. So, reading our book, Miracle Happens, Dr. Brian Weiss, and this book is so beautiful. And today we read chapter number 6 in this book, which is called Letting Go of Grief. So right now we've let go of what was not required by the body, and we've invited what we thought is important for you. Now let me tell you a beautiful thing by Dr. Brian Weiss, that we all have unnecessarily stored grief in our bodies. Now let's understand how to let this go. Grief can be so devastating and painful that it sucks all the joy out of life, making everyday functioning an unbearable burden. It literally takes your breath away. 10 years after the death of my first son, Adam, I learned in my quiet office as Catherine began to remember her past lives that we are souls and not just bodies, that we are all eternal and will be reunited with our loved ones. But I did not know these things when Adam died. Adam's unexpected death in 1971, when he was 23 days old, turned out to be a guiding force in my work. I grieved after the death of my father also, but more so often losing Adam, for the loss of a child is an aberration from the natural order of things. All one's hopes are dashed. The heart is torn. The pain is immeasurable and unspeakable. I know its depths firsthand, so I can empathize completely with others who are going through this process. Since that time, I've learned about the continuity of consciousness after the death of the physical body. I've learned that our loved ones live on and they're simply on the other side, and that we will meet them again and again. When the fear of the loss and death is removed, grief ceases to be so suffocating. These 5 stories demonstrate how acquiring spiritual wisdom can heal grief and restore peace and inner calm in our lives. They remind us that love is never lost. Past life memories, prenatal and infancy memories, and mystical experiences are just a few of the ways in which this knowledge can be gained. Perhaps reading the words in this chapter is another. Once the terrible burden of grief is lifted from our shoulders, we feel lighter and more alive again. I have lived this process and I know the gratitude of being revived. Let these stories breathe life into you too. A vast explosion of love. My husband Richard and I had a stressful marriage and 4 great children. When he retired as an airline pilot, we moved to my house, to my home country, South Africa, to the small part of MacGregor in the Cape Wilderness here. Here, surrounded by mountains and the beauty of the wild veld, I was looking for something that I grandiosely called to myself only the meaning of life. I found the 5 books Dr. Weiss had written. With joy, I read and reread them, and there was an immediate resonance. This was truth. This was the all loving, all embracing meaning that I had thought. My husband said, Lee, you are being weird. For a few years afterwards, we lived in, sorry, for a few years afterwards, we lived as we had before, not unhappily, but making the best we could of it. I went away for 6 weeks to visit our children. When I returned, Richard was different. He too had read Brian's books. With delight, we found that we could now talk openly together about anything, and the following months were the happiest that we have ever shared. We were able to say that we loved each other unconditionally for the first time, and we both began the changes that were necessary for now possible together. In 2002, we went to France to look after the house to look after the house of our oldest son, Will, when he and his wife were away. The joyous relationship continued and grew. We went to Andorra and at dinner in that lovely country beneath the high Pyrenees. We talked of the utter joy that we both felt. Richard said to me, "If I die tonight, Lee, everything is worth it for what we have done, or what we have now." Richard died 2 days later of a massive heart attack. I was with him in the ICU at the hospital. His last words to me were, "I love you forever," and I whispered, "We won." Our two older sons flew in, and on that midsummer Sunday, we held each other and roared our grief, rocking and saying nothing all day but Richard's name. That evening, Will went to walk his dog across the lane, and James, our second son, offered to accompany him. As he passed the gate, I heard Will say, "Dad built these gate posts for me last year," and James clung to one and stayed there. Along on the patio, I rocked and cried, took a small shuffling step, and stepped into total peace. I held my breath so as not to break it, but I had to breathe again. The peace remained. Gasping, I whispered to myself, "Oh, Richard, if you were here and I told you about this, I know that you'd say, Lee, you're being weird again." At that moment, Richard's arms came around me and he held me tightly. In only my right ear, I heard his voice. He said, "Weirdly, you don't know the half of it. It's so wonderful." I turned into a block of ice. Dimly, I felt my sons return. I felt them turn me and sit me in a chair at the patio table. I kept my eyes closed and wished that I could tell them what had happened, but they were both skeptics and they did not need a mad mother just then. So I simply held their hands. Suddenly, James tore his hand from mine, and as I looked up, his face was red and he was shouting. James said, "It's no good. I have to tell you, I'm mad. I'm mad." But when I stood by the gate post, I felt the loveliest peacefulness as I started to feel so guilty that put his arms around me and said, only into my right ear, "James, James, it's all right. Everything exactly as it's meant to be." Before I could say anything, Will flung both arms over his head and said, "Oh, thank God. Thank you, God. Thank you, James. I thought I was mad too and I'd have to give up my job because you can't have mad pilots." It was the same for me. I stood at the fence there and felt such blessed relief and total peace. And as I started to feel guilty, Dad's arms held me, a real dad hug, and he said into my right ear, "Will, oh Will, everything is as it's meant to be." He told me to open my eyes and look, and I could see through everything, and it was all one and all love. Then and then did I tell them what had been my contact. We spent the rest of the night silently, except for Will and James saying once to each other, "Certainty." The peace held all three of us through the next days when my youngest son flew back to MacGregor with me and helped me establish a routine. Richard spoke then to me, saying, "This is necessary and it will not be for long." But I was back in anguish. My grief was so great that I found myself only able to go on if I carried one of Dr. Weiss's books with me wherever I went, even if it was only to go shopping. I told my sister what had happened with my sons on the night Richard died. She who belonged to a fundamentalist religion, told me that I was raising spirits and called me the Witch of Endor. And from then on, I would no longer speak to me, and from then on, would no longer speak to me or answer my messages. Nevertheless, I was determined to continue to change to become the person I was meant to be. Crying most of the time, I began to embrace total honesty and openness, learning not just to be loving, but to be love. I walked the veldt alone a lot. On one Sunday morning, I took my four dogs for one of our long walks into places where there were no other people at all. There were the times when I started to have strong memories of another long ago life, which I thought or as interruptions. I tried pushing these thoughts away until one showed me myself sitting at a candlelit dinner with rose petals on the table. It was during the Middle Ages. I sat beside a much older, very learned man whom I could not look at for shyness. I was 16 and in love with him. Looking down at the table, I saw his right hand, a grey sleeve falling from his arm as his fingers played with a walnut, rolling it exactly as Richard had always done with coins and other small objects. My heartbeat raced. Whoever this man was, he was Richard. I snapped out of it and steadied myself. All four dogs, still on their leashes, suddenly rushed forward up an incline where Richard had often waited for me when we walked together there. The dogs sat down in a semicircle and wagged their tails, and I felt sure that I would find the peace of Richard's presence as I stepped into the space. And I did for a moment. But totally clearly, I heard Richard say beside me, "You were born in the year 1100." I freaked out and turned back, dragging my poor dogs, and with every footstep, I yelled out, prove it, and I ran all the way home. I could not stop this reaction, so I immediately drove to see a friend who, although he did not then accept reincarnation, had been very good to me and had known Richard well. This friend Manny did not believe at the time and that dreams mattered either. I found Manny lying on his bed, one leg bent and the ankle of the other on that knee. He was looking outside to a jacaranda tree in full gorgeous flower. He gave me no words of greeting as I approached, but said only, "Lee, I have had the most amazing dream." Still looking out of the window, he went on, "I dreamt that I was in the most beautiful garden, green lawns to deep grass, green lawns of deep grass and the flowers. Oh, the scent of the flowers." I walked along the grass and then I saw Richard coming towards me. We met, we hugged. He asked me if I could do something for him. Of course, I said. "Anything, Richard." "Lee will be here later," Richard had said. "Will you give her a message from me?" And Manny sat up on his bed and apologized. "Lee, the message is just gibberish." "Gibberish, but I did promise, Richard." He looked so sadly at me. He said, "Tell Lee that 900 years ago I am a big, big dolphin. 30 years before, as a fighter pilot, Richard had flown the RAF with the 19th Squadron, whose emblem he had been delighted to find was a dolphin. Upon seeing dolphins for the first time, he'd fallen in love with them, showing me his huge English electric lightning with his name on the side. He had pointed out dolphin on its tail and proudly said, "I am now a dolphin." He later left the RAF to join British Airways, and in the darkness one night I asked him if he missed being a dolphin. We talked then about the threat of nuclear war, and Richard had said that if he survived, he would get a message to me. But I must never believe a message came from him unless he used the words "I am a dolphin" in it. Until Manny said these words to me again 30 years later, I had completely forgotten this message for the only time in my life. I fainted. When I came to, I told Manny everything, and wonderfully, Manny soon enough experienced his own regressions and came to embrace the concept of reincarnation. I accepted it all, but I was still in some sort of anguish. My children asked me what I'd do if I could do anything, and I immediately said I would like to spend 1 hour with Dr. Brian Wise. Half an hour later, they had arranged for me to have a cabin on the ship where Brian was having a workshop sailing from New York. It was a first session with Brian, shining with love and light on the stage, that I found that hypnosis was exactly like planning a conscious dream. And with Brian's gentle, loving voice, I went back to that earlier life in medieval Paris. It had started with a tremendous love affair with the older Richard that had ended when, at the age of 18, I was forced to become a nun. Richard became a monk, and I was desolately unhappy for the rest of my life. I saw him in a monk's cell, beating his forehead and arms against a stone wall until they bled, yelling my name out loud. If only I in that life had known that little fact, my many years of agony as a nun would have found healing. But that life, was the opposite of my life I now live. In the Middle Ages, I had no freedom at all. In my present life, I'm incredibly free. I was jubilant to experience the regression. To me, this was a colossal change that I needed. It healed the grief that had felt to me like churning glass inside my stomach and heart ever since Richard died. I was blessed beyond anything I could have dreamt. Additionally, I received a short letter from my sister who had not spoken to me for several years. She was responding to the experience that I told her about my quiet time with the Lord. Sorry, just give me. She was responding to the experience that I had told her about with my sons upon Richard's death. My sister wrote, "This morning, in my quiet time with the Lord, He told me that you and your family were given a vast explosion of love and that I must keep right out of it. She signed it with love. As the years pass now, my life is so very peacefully, beautifully, gently, wonderfully different. Ever since the first moment I picked up those books," says Lee Leach. How wonderful. The story is so touching and so beautiful that I can only urge you to read it again and to hear and feel Richard's messages as if Lee and James or Will. The messages are so true, I say, trust the process. And Richard says everything exactly as it meant to be. But these are the same concepts. While I write that we never die, the souls or consciousness continue on after the death of physical bodies, Richard actually came forward to show us this and to add, you don't know the half of it. It's so wonderful. Lee's regression to 900 years ago was merely the final validation, and she was now able to understand completely and to feel perfect peace. Her grief was healed. This is something my brother also told me in my regression when I met her soul and we released it to cross over. He said, Dee, if only you could be here, I would tell you it's so beautiful, peaceful, and lovely here. You can't even imagine. So, all the souls that are actually there find it so tremendously beautiful that we human beings can't even understand half of it. In the 1980s, when I was chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami Beach, I often meditated prior to driving home in the evening after work. One time, as I began the trip home on a beautiful early winter night, I observed a perfect silver of moon hanging low in the western sky. A softly scented sea breeze blew in through the car's open windows. A feeling of deep peacefulness filled my awareness. At that moment, a shift in my perceptions occurred abruptly, like a combination lock suddenly opening when all the tumblers are aligned. Solid objects had a golden light around them and no longer seemed so solid. I could almost see through their newly acquired transparency. The feeling of peacefulness expanded. I knew that everything was perfect. There were no accidents, and there was no need to ever worry or fear. A gentle voice and whispered to me, everything is as it is meant to be. Everything is perfect as it is. I understand how far from perfect things seem to be on the physical level. Violence, accidents, illnesses, and other traumas seem to happen haphazardly, unpredictably, and constantly. Lives can appear ruined in an instant. It is only at the cosmic level that everything is perfect and as it is meant to be. Physical life is like a stage play where unforeseen script changes occurs all the time and chaos reigns on the stage. When the actors go behind the curtains and commotion of the play ends, the actors take off their masks. They resume their permanent identities and lives no longer and lives no longer the characters that they're temporarily portraying. Our current bodies are the stage, the characters, our souls, the enduring actors. While on stage during the play, the characters can experience terrible misfortune, even death, but the actors are never harmed. in the context of our own immortality, in the eternity that transcends all time. Everything's exactly as it is meant to be. Now, whatever lesson you've learned, try to reflect on it today in any time that you choose to do. It is very profound, very deep, and yet very simple. A mother's embrace is the next story of healing. A few years ago, I was in one of your seminars on a cruise to Alaska. In one session, you led a group progression in which you had to go back and relive a birth. I went back, felt myself in the womb and being delivered, and then the most amazing thing happened. I re experienced being placed in my mama's arms for the first time. You see, my parents died 5 months apart from each other when I was 8 years old. Because of the trauma of that, I have no memories of my mother. That day, during the regression, you gave me back a very special memory. As you were taking the group through, I recalled the thought, boy, that doctor is kind of cute. And then I was in my mother's arms and she was looking down at me, smiling. At that point, you led the group onto a past life, but I thought there is no way I'm leaving her. I've not been with my mother for 44 years, and I'm going to stay right here and enjoy this. And that is exactly what I did until you brought the group out of the regression. Before that experience, I was a fairly well functioning adult. But since that, then I have carried an extra glow in my heart that has translated into calmness and confidence that wasn't there before. It is along the same lines of a small child, doubtful for her ability, who blossoms after the mother gives assurance of her love and support. Yesterday was my mother's birthday. She would have been 84. While I wasn't able to call her on the phone, I did communicate with her through a dream, and I give credit for that regression as well. The connection I made that day has left a little porthole open to the other side that I can access whenever I need my mom. And I am in gratitude forever for this amazing gift, says Patricia Cups. Jyoti, you'd raise your hand if there's something you put on the chat box. If it was
I
accidental.
think by mistake, by mistake. I'm so sorry.
I am so blessed to be able to help people have these experiences. Prenatal and early infant memories have been validated over and over again by parents and others. These are real and accurate recollections. It is not difficult to retrieve these very early memories. I first help the person reach a deep level of concentration, relaxation. Then we go backward in time, back through adolescence, through life, childhood, and all the way to infancy and in utero states. I count in reverse from 5 to 1 as an image, a scene, a smell, or an event comes into focus for the person's mind. At first, the image may seem more like a snapshot or photo, although sometimes it may appear more like a movie. Sometimes there is no image, but rather a feeling, a knowing. As I level deepen the level even more, the scene, often accompanied by sensations, feelings, and emotions, becomes even clearer. We have arrived, and the wonderful reunions and memories remind us that love never ends, that our loved ones are alive in our past, yet also in our futures. On those cold Alaskan waters, a miracle was unfolding. Even though I did not know it at that time, Patricia's life was forever changed. The grief that she had been carrying for 43 years was dissolving. A portal to the other side was opening. Reaching through that portal the first time was healing for Patricia, and even more wonderfully, it has now become second nature for her. Our loved ones reach back through that portal too. Although we may not always be aware of it, they visit us daily if need be to express their love, to soothe our pain, and even as Jessica discovered in the next story, to hold us in their arms and dance with us one last time. Now, this brings us to the third story of healing, grief healing, and that is dancing in the fields. Jessica, a school teacher in her 30s with blonde hair, blue eyes, and a soft spoken voice, drove hours from Central Florida to visit me in my office. She had two children who were delivered via cesarean section when she became pregnant with her third child, a healthy boy. She had opted to deliver Eleanor naturally in her home, but process, her uterus ruptured. The placenta detached, and the baby suffered from a fatal lack of oxygen as he was rushed to the hospital. He was immediately put on life support, but it was too late. He died only 10 days later. As Jessica told me her history, my heart sank. No one deserves to experience the loss of a child, surely, but the woman sitting in front of me was so gentle and kind that I couldn't imagine why such a devastating thing would happen to her. Neither could I imagine the death of my child, much less feeling the tremendous guilt that a decision I had made might have contributed to that outcome. Jessica had read my father's books and found solace in them. She was seeing another therapist who was helping her with the bereavement process. I was in awe of how well she was coping. I'd have considered it a success to simply get out of bed in the morning, put one foot in front of the other, and survive the next day. It was evident that strength of steel lay under Jessica's sweet exterior. Nonetheless, I was as if she wore the pain on the outside of her body. I could see it. I could almost reach out and touch it. Its bottomless depth frightened me. I was a fairly new therapist, certainly new to hypnosis, and I feared that the trip down to my office might have been a complete waste of her time. What on earth could I say or do that could possibly alleviate Jessica's suffering? And what could even make a dent in that kind of pain? Jessica described the difficulty she'd had with the physicians when she had delivered her first two children. Her soft voice grew an edge. She spoke of her mistrust of them, of how medical errors had been made, and how understandably these errors had led her to choose a different method for bringing Elliot into the world. She had scrupulously researched the benefits and risks of vaginal birth after cesareans. She could not have made a more informed decision from her history with her two first deliveries. It was clear why she had chosen as she did. The more we discovered Elliot, the more I tried to detach from her trauma, but I felt I was right there with her, as if while our bodies sat there talking about, our souls were hovering on the ground together, staring at each other with sad, disbelieving eyes. Can life really get this painful? And how do you survive when it invariably does? As Jessica brought up the hypothetical scenario of having another child, her anger dissolved into sheer panic. What would be the right thing to do then? How could she trust the doctors again? What if, for whatever reason, made she d- she sorry, what if whatever reason she had made turned out to be the wrong one? She had given her past and her future much thought, and it's clear that questions about both caused a great distress. As I hypnotized Jessica and brought her to a past life, she first saw only vague colors appearing at waves and dots. It's all just light, she thought, literally turning my hands into prayer and staring up at the ceiling. Thankfully, that my client's eyes were closed. Angels, God, whoever is up there, you have to do better than that. I prayed before each client for help and healing energy, but that day I was no gentle, that it was no gentle request. Suddenly, in the midst of these pulsating light forms, the image of an apron appeared in Jessica's mind. Thank you, I said to the sky, breathing a sigh of relief. Jessica saw herself as a young woman on a big wooden porch, like something out of Little House on the Prairie. She was leaning on a post, sweating from the summer sun and From physical feel the tension in her neck and shoulders, not just from the manual labor, but also from a crushing loneliness. She sensed from that she wanted children and a family, but did not have any. It's all too heavy, she said. We moved ahead in time to that night where the woman was lying in bed, contemplating reaching out for the Bible on the nightstand, but too tired to make even that little comforting gesture. Jessica saw the woman sobbing, feeling sad and frustrated and restless all at once. She had a large house, but overseeing it was an overwhelming task for her. And the rural area in which she lived was isolated, offering no friendships. The townspeople considered her to be so fortunate she owned a big house, that great front porch, a cow, but she felt no happiness in any of the assets. Although she was only in her 20s, she felt it seemed too tired and sad to live. We moved ahead in time again, but it was more the same. The woman toiling away in the front yard, working so hard simply to survive this joy exercise, this joyless existence. And then Jessica saw a little girl dancing and twirling around the woman in the dirt. The woman doesn't see her, she said, confused, but the girl is just dancing, dancing away. Jessica saw a man, to the woman's husband, standing off to the side of the porch. He and the girl were so close to the woman, loving her as she worked, loving her as she was on the porch and cried. But she never knew they were there. Drowning in her pain, she was aware of nothing but loneliness. Where had these spirits come from? To find out, we moved back in time. There was an accident, a buggy that crashed when a horse slipped on some wet rocks. The cart carrying the child and the husband fell off, killing them instantly. The woman had not been inside. She had wanted to go with them, had planned on it, and for some reason, from the last minute, she hadn't. She had loved them so much, and she felt terribly guilty and responsible for their deaths. But it wasn't your fault. It wasn't even the horse's fault. Sometimes accidents just happen. I said, thinking also of Elliot. Jessica nodded, tears in her eyes, but she didn't seem to believe it. It sounds like you wish you'd been there with them. I said in a soft voice, and she moaned, "Oh, yes." The woman lived many, many lonely years. Throughout the days, she worked by the front porch where her husband whacked her, and with nothing but love in her eyes, and her daughter spanning over into oblivion, danced right next to her every day of her life. As Jessica floated beyond her old body, she started shaking her head as if in disbelief of how she had lived. "We're not supposed to be miserable," she said. "There was so much good and that she couldn't have done." The woman had been so inextricably bogged down in grief and loss that she had never recovered. Thinking of Jessica and she was today, I asked, but how could she have recovered from that kind of loss? So easily, Jessica's answered smilingly. If she just could have been seen them dancing around her. The little girl and the husband faithfully showing up every day in the front yard were trying to tell her that they were fine, that they loved her, that they had never left her. But she could not see it. She hurt, but she didn't have to. They were stepping right here in front of her, and she just didn't get it. This was an extraordinary lesson to help relieve Jessica of some of her current feelings of grief, as unbelievable as it seemed given the trauma that she had recently experienced with her son. Her suffering was so close to her. If she only knew that Elliot was most likely still loving her from no farther than the air she breathed, she would never have cause to feel that unbearable pain again. The following day, in our session together, Jessica slipped in and out of numerous past lives. In one, she was the daughter of a kind of hermetic medicine man, a soul so wise and advanced beyond his years. She eventually had her own family but died young, leaving behind a small child whom she loved. Jessica felt that Elliot was the youngest child in that lifetime. It felt like he and I switched places this time. I left him early in the life, he left me early in this one. Oh, she said. Realization was dawning on her. In this life, he wasn't punishing me at all. He was just showing me what it feels like to be the one left behind rather than the one leaving early. But love doesn't go away. We do, but love never does. She sensed that Elliot was also her beloved father in the regression. He seemed to have it all figured out. She said he was so loving, nothing bothered him. Everything he did was in gentleness and kindness for the betterment of humanity. Jessica's lifetimes with Elliot were ancient, innumerable, arising throughout the years as the souls breathed together again and again to teach, to learn, to love. It was no accident that he had appeared to her in her present life. He was so intrinsically linked to her, a part of her, but the form, the relationship, the circumstances always varied. As she sat in front of me, Jessica's face completely changed. There were no lines of sadness, no weary eyes, only love, joy, even excitement. As odd as it sounds, she didn't even see human anymore with her fair coloring and her beatific expression. She looked like an angel, a blissful spirit, glowing with the peace beyond words. She was beaming, and the light transformed every part of her. It was the end of our times together. I didn't think Jessica could be any happier, which seemed almost perverse considering the reason why she had come to see me. It was incredible to witness. You do good work, she had. You do good work, I said to the sky. I closed to the session by bringing Jessica to a peaceful wildflower field in her mind and having her visualize her guide joining her to give her guidance about how she could continue to heal even after she left the office. Jessica's guide, her wise and loving teacher, was of course Elliot. She imagined holding this little baby body from which a bright light started shooting. Elliot opened his eyes. After the session, Jessica marveled in the fact he was born brain dead. She said, I never got to see his eyes. In her mind, Elliot hoped, bopped her on the nose and winked at her as if she was saying, Gotcha. As if this whole thing, this whole tumble through our times, this endless lifetimes together, this endless thing, endless bubbling up of deaths upon births upon deaths was nothing more like cosmic joke. Here you guess Jessica, just as anyone would, suffered from the loss of a healthy baby, suddenly dead in both brain and body. Yet Elliot himself couldn't take it seriously. All he had to say about the matter was something like, My turn, tag, you're it. To Jessica, Elliot, the baby, who was now chuckling on the chin and winking at her, was clearly the adult and she the child. This was a soul so old, so loving, very much an advanced teacher. As Jessica held him in her arms, her body started to disappear, dissolving into the bright light that grew stronger and stronger, larger and larger, until he was so big, bright, big way about the body, and his light filled up the entire field. The wildflowers, the grass, the enormous blue sky shone with his light. He was larger than she was, larger than anything she could ever imagine. I had Jessica reflect back on her feeling of responsibility, knowing that a soul so vast it could encompass the entire world could never be snuffled out of by a single decision, a single accident. She just laughed, as if the very question that she had not
once stopped asking herself no longer made sense. When whose fault was his death? Mine, the doctors, no one's. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Jessica then saw herself pregnant, and soon after, the healthy baby in her arms in a hospital room. Elliot was not his child, but he was very much there with her, his light exploding. He's radiating the whole room. She breathed. It's as if every wall has light beams all over. It is all him all over. As Jessica held the new baby, Elliot held Jessica. He kissed the baby's head again and again. There was no sadness, no pain, only the purest love as Elliot protectively watched over them. Although Jessica was unsure if she and her husband even wanted more children, I recalled how she poured out every detail of birth plan, deliveries, and doctors as she thought about what might happen, what could happen, what did happen. I thought it would help her to know that the birth turned out, but she smiled as she brushed the question off as utterly irrelevant. It doesn't matter, those are human details. To answer your question, I had a C section, but doesn't matter. I'm just nursing. She looked down at the baby in her arms, knowing full well how present Elliot was in the room and in their lives. I'm just nursing. Jessica had tears of joy in her eyes. I did too. I was in awe of Elliot's infinite soul and his love. Nothing could hurt him, which means that nothing could hurt any of us either. What room is there for grief and love? What does the death of anyone even mean when we can be with them again in our minds, when we can hold their bodies again and they can hold us again, and we finally look into the world, an eye we could never see clear on earth. Our own eyes remain closed to all the love around us, and we suffer as we imagine ourselves to be alone or left behind, and all we ever have to do is just open them from to find our loved ones, dancing with us there in the fields until the end of time, says Amy Wise. Amy had said it all and said it so well. If only we could see our departed loved ones dancing around us, continuing to love us, to protect us, to wait for us, then our grief would be so much lesser. In my book, Many Lives, Many Masters, I changed the name of the physician who had helped Catherine so much, who had referred her to me. He's the one who unknowingly started this entire process, this discovery of past lives. I changed his name to Edward for reasons of confidentiality. His name was Elliot. Once in a deeply hypnotized state, Catherine's head began to move from side to side. A spirit is looking, she told me, at you. Yes. Do you recognize the spirit? I'm not sure. I think it might be Edward. Edward had died during the previous year. Edward was truly ubiquitous. He seems to be always around us. What did the spirit look like? Just white, like lights. He had no face, nor like we know, but I know it's he. Was he communicating at all with you? No, he was just watching. Was he listening to what I was saying? Yes. But he's gone now. He just wanted to be sure that I'm all right. I thought about the popular mythology of the guardian angel. Certainly, Edward Eliot, in his role of a hovering, loving spirit, watching over to make sure she was all right, approached such an angelic role. Every one of us has an Elliot or two or three in our lives. With this, we conclude today's session. I'm sure read the remaining two stories on overcoming grief tomorrow. And I will request everyone just close their eyes for 2 minutes and feel what you're feeling in your heart right now. It's been a long read. You have to process the truth of these three stories of overcoming grief. What's gone in the physical level is not coming back. Yet, one can always connect with loved ones by simply reaching out and by imagining the veil between them opening up. Life is so beautiful, so giving. Let's process whatever we've learned. So much to be received, so much to be given. Feel the love being showered on you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing this space and expanding our endless heart with so much of love, with so much of light that shines bright. All we have to do is tune in. So be the light, see the light, and let's just genuinely enjoy this magical world far and beyond the capacity of our human eyes. Lots of love and light. Keep shining bright. I'll see you in the gap tomorrow morning at 6. Until then, take care and have a beautiful day.